Hi, I'm Annie Fitzsimmons. I'm your Washington REALTORS Legal Hotline lawyer. And now all of you are using Form 21 with a revision date of August 24. If you have not already learned about the restructuring of the buyer brokerage commission provision on the face of Form 21, you would better get up to speed before you write the next transaction. Because if you don't understand the operation of the revised Form 21 as it relates to buyer brokerage compensation, you may not fill in the form correctly, and if you don't, you may not receive the compensation you intended to receive. So direct your attention to Form 21, paragraph 17. And you will see that there are now two blanks that are side by side in that provision. Beneath the blanks, they are labeled 17A and 17B. 17A is where you should identify the amount of compensation that seller offered to a buyer broker, assuming seller made an offer of compensation to a buyer broker. If seller made no offer of compensation to a buyer broker, then you would put 0 in that blank. If seller made an offer of compensation, then you must accurately identify the amount of compensation seller offered to buyer broker. And in the next blank, 17B, you will identify the amount of compensation that buyer is asking seller to pay buyer broker at closing. If seller signs buyer's offer with that paragraph 17B completed, then seller is obligated to pay at closing the amount of the identified compensation to buyer broker. If you've ever taken a class from me about how to fill in the Form 21 paragraph 17 prior to August of 2024, then I want you to forget what I've said in the past, because what I've said in the past is you don't negotiate compensation on the face of Form 21. That is no longer true. With the revised Form 21, revision date 8/24, buyer brokers, you negotiate compensation that seller will pay to the buyer broker at closing on the face of the Form 21, paragraph 17, the second blank, paragraph 17B. And what the boilerplate language at the back of the form says is that regardless of what seller has offered, the amount identified in the blank space 17B is the amount that seller shall pay buyer broker at closing. Now, before you start to think to yourself that the first provision, 17A, what seller has offered, isn't important, it's a throwaway provision. It's not, because Washington law requires that you disclose to a buyer whatever compensation seller may have offered. Seller or listing firm may have offered to the buyer broker. You have to disclose that as a matter of Washington law. And you need to be correct. But in the second paragraph, you negotiate the amount of compensation seller will actually pay. Even if seller offered nothing, so you've got a 0 in 17A, you could have an amount in 17B, and if seller signs buyer's purchase and sale agreement offer as drafted, seller will be obligated to pay the amount in 17B. Buyer brokers, you have to know how to use this form if you want to get paid. And listing brokers, you better understand the significance of paragraph 17B in Form 21. Because if you are not up to speed and you're reviewing an offer made to your seller and you have the knowledge of the old Form 21 in your head, then you are not going to understand that when buyer has written a specific amount in paragraph 17B, that your seller will be obligated to pay that amount at the closing table. It is no longer just a disclosure. It's now a disclosure in 17A and a contract in 17B. Seller is obligated to pay the amount identified in 17B. If you have any questions on this topic or any other, please ask me a question by visiting warealtor.org. Thank you for being a Washington REALTORS member.